Most people believe influence is verbal. They think persuasion is about arguments, about charisma, about saying the right thing at the right time. But the most powerful form of influence begins long before speech. It operates in presence, in pacing, in restraint, in silence. Before anyone speaks, hierarchy is already forming. And the person who understands this never needs to convince. 1. Presence, the invisible weight in the room. Influence does not begin with speech. It begins with atmosphere. Before you say a word, before you introduce yourself, before you attempt to persuade, the room has already judged you. Humans are biologically wired to scan for hierarchy. We measure posture before ideas, breathing before arguments, stillness before intelligence. Presence is not personality. It is regulation. Most people enter a room leaking signals. Nervous energy. Approval-seeking smiles. Overextended gestures. Rapid speech to fill empty space. These are not random habits. They are submission cues. The body reveals what the ego tries to hide. But controlled presence operates differently. It is economical, deliberate, contained. The shoulders remain relaxed, not tense. Movements are minimal, not scattered. Eye contact is steady, not confrontational. Breathing is slow, not reactive. This creates something invisible yet unmistakable. Weight. Not loud dominance. Not theatrical confidence. Weight. And weight changes the psychological field. When someone carries internal stability, others feel it immediately. Conversations slow down. Interruptions decrease. People choose their words more carefully. Why? Because nervous systems synchronize to the most regulated presence in the environment. If you are calm under pressure, others unconsciously calibrate to you. If you remain grounded during tension, you become the emotional anchor. And anchors determine direction. Presence is power because it signals surplus. Surplus of emotion. Surplus of certainty. Surplus of self-control. The person who is comfortable in silence is perceived as having options. The person who does not rush is perceived as having leverage. The person who does not seek attention becomes the center of it. This is the paradox. The more you try to appear powerful, the less presence you carry. True presence is not performed. It is restrained. It does not demand space. It occupies it. It does not chase validation. It assumes legitimacy. And assumption is influence. Presence is the invisible weight in the room. Because it cannot be argued with. It is felt before it is understood. Master your breath. Slow your movements. Speak less than necessary. Hold eye contact 1 second longer than comfort requires. Not to intimidate, but to signal containment. Because influence without speech begins with one truth. If you control yourself, you control the atmosphere. And whoever controls the atmosphere controls the outcome. 2. Pacing. Whoever controls the tempo controls the frame. Influence is rarely about what is said. It is about when it is said, how fast it is said, and who feels pressure to say it first. Most people lose power through urgency. They rush to reply, rush to clarify, rush to defend, rush to fill silence. Urgency signals psychological pressure. And pressure reveals position. The one who feels the need to respond immediately is already reacting. And reaction is a lower frame. Tempo is a dominant signal. Conversations are rhythmic. Every interaction has a tempo. A pace that determines who is leading and who is adjusting. When someone interrupts you, they are attempting to accelerate tempo. When someone demands an instant answer, they are trying to impose urgency. When someone speaks rapidly and emotionally, they are transferring nervous energy into the space. If you match that speed, you surrender control. Because whoever sets the tempo sets the frame. And whoever sets the frame controls perception. The power of delayed response. Silence for 2 seconds longer than expected changes everything. It creates tension. It forces anticipation. It signals that you are thinking, not reacting. When someone challenges you, and you pause before answering, you subtly reverse pressure. Now they are waiting. Now they are scanning your face. Now they are uncertain. And uncertainty shifts hierarchy. Most people are uncomfortable with pauses. They rush to fill them. But the person who can tolerate silence without anxiety creates psychological gravity. Gravity pulls attention inward. It slows the room. It increases perceived authority. Slowness signals surplus. Fast speech is often insecurity disguised as enthusiasm. It reveals a need to be understood. A fear of being interrupted. A fear of losing attention. But controlled pacing signals surplus. You are not afraid of being cut off. You are not racing to be validated. You are not competing for airtime. You speak slowly because you assume the room will wait. And assumption becomes reality. Humans mirror the most stable rhythm present. If you lower your vocal speed, others unconsciously slow down. If you reduce emotional spikes in tone, others soften theirs. If you breathe deeply during tension, the nervous systems around you recalibrate. Pacing is not manipulation. It is emotional leadership. Controlling time means controlling pressure. Pressure is created by time constraints. Deadlines. Immediate answers. Rapid exchanges. When you remove urgency, you remove leverage. If someone tries to rush you, and you calmly respond, "I'll think about it," you reclaim the timeline. When you take longer than expected to reply to provocation, you deny emotional escalation. When you refuse to be hurried into decisions, you protect your frame. Because haste benefits the one who applies it. Stillness benefits the one who resists it. The hidden hierarchy of conversation. Notice something. In any group setting, there is usually one person who speaks last. One who does not interrupt. One who listens longer than others. One who answers briefly and decisively. That person often holds influence, without obvious dominance. Why? Because they are not chasing space. They are choosing it. And choice signals power. The individual who is comfortable allowing others to speak first gathers information, reads motivations, observes emotional shifts. Then, when they finally speak, their words carry weight. Not because of volume, but because of timing. The Machiavellian insight. Those who control tempo control outcomes. Speed is a tool of the insecure. Pacing is a weapon of the strategic. If you want influence without persuasion, respond slower than expected. Pause before answering challenges. Lower your vocal rhythm under pressure. Refuse artificial urgency. Not aggressively. Not theatrically. Calmly. Because the calm individual appears above the situation. And the one who appears above the situation defines it. Final principle. You do not need louder arguments. You need slower timing. You do not need sharper words. You need controlled rhythm. When you control your tempo, you control your nervous system. When you control your nervous system, you control the emotional climate. And when you control the emotional climate, you control the frame. Influence without speech is often influence through time. And time, when mastered, becomes authority. 3. Silence, the most misunderstood form of power. Silence is often mistaken for weakness, for avoidance, for passivity, for fear. But in psychological reality, silence is rarely submission. More often, it is restraint. And restraint signals control. Most people talk to relieve pressure. When confronted, most individuals feel an immediate impulse. Defend. Explain. Justify. React. Why? Because tension is uncomfortable. Silence creates tension. And insecure minds rush to dissolve it. They speak not to communicate, but to regulate their own anxiety. They argue not to persuade, but to protect ego. They over-explain not to clarify, but to regain control. But every unnecessary word leaks position, because the one who feels compelled to respond is already influenced. Silence reverses psychological pressure. When someone attacks you verbally, they expect resistance. When someone provokes you emotionally, they expect reaction. When someone criticizes you publicly, they expect defense. Silence disrupts that expectation. It creates a vacuum. And humans cannot tolerate vacuums for long. So they begin to fill it. They talk more. Reveal more. Expose intention. Escalate unnecessarily. In trying to force a reaction, they often reveal insecurity. Meanwhile, you remain still. And stillness under pressure rearranges hierarchy. Because calm in confrontation signals emotional independence. The fear of being unreadable. People trust what they can predict. Silence removes predictability. If you argue back, they know your position. If you defend yourself, they know your insecurity. If you over-explain, they know your need for approval. But if you remain silent, they do not know where you stand. And uncertainty creates caution. Unreadable individuals are difficult to manipulate. Because manipulation depends on emotional hooks. Silence removes the hook. No reaction. No escalation. No validation of the provocation. The manipulator loses leverage. And leverage is power. Silence is emotional self-sufficiency. Silence does not mean suppression. It means you do not require immediate resolution. It means you are comfortable allowing misunderstanding. It means you do not panic when someone mislabels you. Emotionally dependent people need to correct perception instantly. Emotionally sovereign people allow perception to unfold. Because they are not governed by reputation in the moment. They are governed by internal authority. And internal authority does not tremble under noise. The strategic use of non-response. Not every silence is powerful. Avoidant silence is anxious. Punitive silence is manipulative. Fear-based silence is defensive. But controlled silence is different. It is deliberate. It is aware. It chooses not to engage because engagement would lower position. Sometimes the most dominant move is refusing to enter the arena. If someone attempts to bait you into argument, you do not owe participation. If someone misjudges you, you do not owe explanation. If someone seeks drama, you do not owe reaction. Silence becomes power. When it is chosen from strength, not fear. Why silence feels threatening. Silence forces others to confront themselves. Without your response. They sit with their own words. Without your reaction. They feel the weight of their behavior. Without your validation. Their certainty begins to wobble. Silence exposes imbalance. That is why it unsettles. It removes the emotional exchange that unstable dynamics depend on. And without exchange, the dynamic collapses. The Machiavellian principle. Influence is not always exerted. Sometimes it is withheld. The one who reacts least is often controlling most. The one who remains calm during accusation is perceived as stronger than the accuser. The one who can tolerate being misunderstood without immediate correction demonstrates psychological endurance. Silence communicates something primal. I am not threatened. And the one who is not threatened cannot be easily moved. Final truth. Silence is not absence. It is signal. It signals composure. It signals boundaries. It signals independence. Used recklessly, it isolates. Used strategically, it elevates. In a world addicted to noise, the rare individual who can remain quiet under pressure appears immovable. And what appears immovable is rarely challenged twice. Silence is misunderstood because it requires inner stability. But when mastered, it becomes the most efficient form of power. No argument. No escalation. No exposure. Just presence. And presence, without reaction, reshapes the room. 4. Environmental influence, power beyond interaction. Influence does not begin with conversation. It begins with positioning. Long before you speak. Before you gesture. Before you attempt persuasion. You are shaping the environment. And whoever shapes the environment shapes perception. Space is a psychological weapon. Most people move through space unconsciously. They sit where they are told. They shrink when crowded. They avoid central positions. They protect themselves with closed posture. But environment is never neutral. Where you stand communicates status. Where you sit signals confidence. What you touch implies ownership. Leaders instinctively choose positions that allow visibility. Not to dominate, but to observe. Visibility without anxiety suggests comfort with attention. Comfort with attention suggests authority. The individual who naturally claims space without apology alters the social field without speaking. The power of angles and distance. Psychological influence is geometric. Direct confrontation creates tension. Strategic angles create control. Sitting slightly angled instead of directly squared reduces hostility while maintaining command. Standing upright but relaxed signals ease, not aggression. Maintaining balanced distance avoids both submission and invasion. Even subtle details, like not leaning in too quickly or not retreating too fast, shape subconscious impressions. You are either stable in space or adjusting to others. The one adjusting is negotiating position. The one stable is defining it. Control the emotional climate. Environmental influence is emotional regulation projected outward. If tension rises and you remain grounded, you stabilize the room. If conflict escalates and you slow your breathing, others unconsciously recalibrate. If anxiety spreads and you do not mirror it, you become the anchor. Humans look for stability in uncertainty. The person who does not emotionally fluctuate becomes the reference point. And reference points determine direction. You do not need to speak to guide a room. You only need to remain centered while others destabilize. Minimalism as authority. Overexpression reduces perceived power. Too many gestures. Too many reactions. Too much explanation. Environmental dominance is subtle. It is fewer movements. Fewer words. Fewer visible emotional shifts. When you reduce outward signals, others increase attention toward you. Silence pulls focus. Stillness amplifies presence. In digital environments, this applies equally. Long emotional messages lower position. Brief, composed responses elevate it. Delayed replies create anticipation. Neutral tone removes leverage. Even online. Whoever controls response timing controls perception. The psychology of ownership. Ownership is often nonverbal. Touching a table confidently. Resting your arm without tension. Placing objects deliberately. These are territorial cues. Not aggressive. Not exaggerated. Simply unhurried. Rushed movements imply uncertainty. Deliberate movements imply entitlement. And entitlement, when calm, is interpreted as legitimacy. The one who moves as if they belong is rarely questioned. Because confidence in environment signals familiarity with power. Environmental influence in conflict. When challenged publicly, most people lean forward defensively. They narrow their posture. Tighten their tone. Accelerate their words. But controlled individuals do the opposite. They slow down. Relax their shoulders. Lower their voice. This contrast destabilizes the aggressor. Because aggression feeds on mirrored intensity. Without escalation, it loses fuel. When you do not enter their emotional frame, their strategy weakens. Environmental control becomes silent dominance. The Machiavellian insight. Power is often architectural. It is about structure. Who sits at the head of the table? Who speaks last? Who remains composed when others shift? If you cannot control the room verbally, control it spatially. If you cannot control the argument, control the atmosphere. If you cannot dominate emotionally, refuse to be moved. Environmental influence is not loud. It is structural. It changes how interactions unfold, without appearing to interfere. And that subtlety is what makes it powerful. Final truth. Influence without speech is influence through environment, through posture, through pacing, through space, through emotional steadiness. You do not need to overpower. You need to remain stable, while others fluctuate. Because instability seeks grounding. And the one who remains grounded becomes the ground. When you become the environment, others unconsciously adapt to you. No persuasion required. No argument necessary. Just controlled presence. Shaping the outcome before a single word is spoken. 5. The biology of nonverbal authority. Before language, there was hierarchy. Before arguments, there were signals. Long before humans developed speech, we survived by reading posture, breathing patterns, eye direction, and nervous system stability. Nonverbal authority is not a social trick. It is biological memory. And the body still obeys it. The nervous system never stops scanning. Every human nervous system constantly asks one silent question. Who here is stable? Not who is loud. Not who is intelligent. Not who is expressive. Who is regulated? Because regulation signals survival capacity. A calm individual under pressure communicates strength at a primal level. Steady breathing lowers group anxiety. Measured movement reduces perceived threat. Stable eye contact suggests internal coherence. These cues bypass logic. They are processed instantly. And they shape hierarchy before thought begins. Stress exposure reveals true position. Authority is not measured in comfort. It is measured under tension. When stress enters a room, watch what happens. Some voices rise. Some gestures become sharper. Some faces tighten. Micro-expressions betray instability. But one person remains slow. Breath unchanged. Tone steady. Posture grounded. That individual becomes the reference point. Because the brain seeks safety. And safety is associated with control. Not dominance. Control. The one who controls themselves appears capable of controlling circumstances. And capability commands deference. Mirror neurons and emotional synchronization. Humans unconsciously mirror the strongest emotional signal present. If anxiety dominates, anxiety spreads. If anger escalates, anger multiplies. But if calm remains steady, calm recalibrates the group. This is not philosophy. It is neurology. The most regulated nervous system becomes the anchor. Others begin to synchronize. Their breathing slows. Their tone adjusts. Their posture softens. They may not know why. But their biology responds. Influence without speech is synchronization without command. The hormonal dimension of authority. Confidence is not declared. It is felt. Stable body language correlates with lower visible stress responses. Less fidgeting. Less facial tension. Less erratic pacing. These subtle cues affect perception. People associate composure with competence. And competence with leadership. When your body signals calm under scrutiny, observers interpret that calm as capability. Because evolution favored those who did not panic under threat. The body that does not react impulsively is assumed to have options. And options equal power. Eye contact, the ancient test. Eye contact remains one of the most primal dominance exchanges. Avoidant gaze signals insecurity. Overly aggressive staring signals threat. But steady, relaxed eye contact signals comfort. Not challenge. Comfort. The one who can maintain gaze without tension communicates psychological balance. And balance suggests internal authority. In ancient hierarchies, predators held gaze without fear. Prey broke eye contact first. That coding still lives in the brain. Which is why eye stability carries more influence than verbal assertion. Breathing, the hidden lever. Most people underestimate breath. Under stress, breathing becomes shallow and rapid. This signals danger internally. When you deliberately slow your breath during confrontation, you override that signal. You remain centered. And your steadiness becomes contagious. Breath is the foundation of presence. Without it, composure collapses. With it, authority stabilizes. Control your breath. And you control your nervous system. Control your nervous system. And you control your influence. The Machiavellian biological insight. True influence does not rely on persuasion. It relies on perception. And perception is shaped by biology. Long before logic intervenes. You can argue your intelligence. You cannot argue your nervous system. If your body signals fear, no speech will restore authority. If your body signals control, few words are required. Machiavellian strategy begins with understanding this. Power is most convincing when it appears effortless. Effortlessness is read biologically as surplus capacity. Surplus capacity is interpreted as dominance. Final principle. Nonverbal authority is ancient. It is the language beneath language. It determines who is followed, who is challenged, who is ignored, who is respected. You do not need louder arguments. You need regulated physiology. Slow breath. Steady gaze. Measured movement. Unhurried responses. Because before anyone hears your ideas, they feel your nervous system. And the one whose nervous system remains unshaken is perceived as unshakable. Influence without speech is influence through biology. Master that, and words become optional.